into work late one morning and goes to see her boss to apologize for being late. She says, "I'm sorry I'm late, but I had to move some furniture this morning before I came to work, and in fact, my back is killing me from moving the couch." "Well, why didn't you wait until your husband came home from work tonight?" And she answered, "Well, I could have, but the couch is much easier to move when he's not laying on it." Rearranging the furniture. Doesn't that sound like a good image for Lent? As you know, in the past 2 weeks, I have proposed two other images for Lent. For the first Sunday of Lent, I said Lent is like swimming against the current. And then last week, for the second Sunday in Lent, I said Lent is like getting a chiropractic adjustment, which is what you would need if you tried to move a couch by yourself. So today, I just simply want to argue that Lent is like rearranging the furniture in our homes. Now, I think it was a couple of Monday nights ago, Derek, I'm talking to you now. I think I heard you say that you've lived in maybe 17 homes in your life. You had counted them up. Derek is younger than I am. By my count, I have lived in no less than 30 homes in my life in 12 different cities or towns. Now, that's a lot of furniture moving. It also keeps me one step ahead of the law. So it's not a bad thing. But when one moves around as much as I have, one gets pretty adept at arranging and sometimes rearranging furniture if your wife will let you. But the goal of furniture arrangement is very simple. It's to highlight your best furniture in the best possible place, and maybe to hide something that might be a little damaged or broken or wore out, and yes, crooked. And I think this applies to our faith life, does it not? Don't we try to hide our crooked timber as much as we can? Aren't we always in the process of rearranging our spiritual furniture, putting our best furniture out front, and maybe hiding our worst? If you've been here, you have picked up on a recurring theme also throughout the season of Lent, which is what we call the crooked timber of humanity. As I've been saying, this is a metaphor that was given to us from the 18th century German philosopher named Immanuel Kant. And it basically just implies that we are damaged, we're broken, we're wore out, we are crooked human beings. And that's a side of us it's not going away. It's who we are. We can't get rid of it in a yard sale. We can't take it to the trash dump, tear it up and take off with it. But maybe we can rearrange some things about us. So our three readings today all have this sense that something needs to be rearranged. And now I'm going to point it out to you. The first reading was from the book of Exodus. And this reading reminds us that the ancient Israelites moved around quite a bit. One of their earliest big moves was out of Egypt. And in Exodus chapter 20, specifically in verse 2, God claims to be the one who brought them out of Egypt. More specifically, he says, out of the house of slavery. Now, there's not a lot of furniture in a house of slavery, so they didn't have to worry about renting U-Hauls. And also, they were in a pretty big hurry, so the only thing of value they took with them was stolen jewelry, which they quickly fashioned insanely, into a golden calf. So now here they are, they're wandering around in the Sinai wilderness, preparing hopefully that someday they'll be able to cross the Jordan River to get to their ancestral home. And when they get there, they won't have much furniture to arrange. And yet there is one thing that they can work on now, that they can rearrange in their lives, and that is their priorities. You know, one of the most obvious ways that we reveal our crooked side of humanity is through our priorities. Our priorities fit into one of two categories, much like missiles do. They're either guided or they're misguided. And it's the latter category that needs rearrangement. We can gauge a person's spiritual life by their priorities, by what they prioritize in their lives. For example, if a person prioritizes pursuing wealth over nurturing relationships, then there needs to be a rearrangement. If a person prioritizes social media friends over real friends, there needs to be a rearrangement. If a person prioritizes anything at all over the well-being of other human beings, you can fill in the blanks there, there needs to be a rearrangement of priorities. And the wandering former slaves, the Israelites, they needed a rearrangement. Like a bad piece of furniture, as a people they were damaged, they were broken, they were wore out, and they were crooked. And they knew that in order for their long-term survival, they, as a nation, they would need to learn how to be more unified and more cohesive, all on the same page as a people. They needed to be devoted to the same God and have the same moral code, the same moral compass. They needed desperately to reassess and rearrange their priorities. So enter the 10 Commandments. Perfect timing. For these wandering slaves, the 10 Commandments help them to kind of get things in order, to rearrange the metaphorical furniture in their lives. So for them, and even for us, I think, this meant several things. First, it meant putting the one true God first and only. It also meant finding time, because remember, these are former slaves who worked 24/7. So it meant also rediscovering time that they could rest and focus on this one true God, which we call the Sabbath. It also meant prioritizing family. You know, in that place and time and in the ancient world in general, the elderly were not valued very much. They were seen as disposable almost, because they took a lot of care, they took a lot of resources that people didn't have. And so what the Ten Commandments tell us is to honor our parents so that we'll live longer, which means if you honor your parents, then your kids will take care of you, and you will also get to live a longer life. And then finally, for the last half of the Ten Commandments, were designed to help them prioritize the ethical stuff in their lives, things that help people stay together in community, stuff like overcoming their violent tendencies, overcoming unfaithfulness and theft and lying and coveting other people's stuff. By the way, I think that last commandment, being covetous or coveting things, is really sort of the key to all this, because coveting things will lead to more violence and will lead to unfaithfulness and theft and lying. And so the Ten Commandments, I think, could be renamed Ancient Israel's Rearrangement of Priorities. Well, like the Israelites of old, you and I are asked to rearrange our priorities, to consider more seriously what it means to live in community and with one another and with our God. And Lent is the perfect season for reflecting on our priorities. Our second reading is from 1 Corinthians, and in this reading in chapter 1, this teaches us that rearranging our spiritual furniture could mean reconsidering what is foolish and what is wise. Now, let me be literal for a moment, talking about furniture. At first glance, it might seem wise to have a particular piece of furniture or a particular decorating scheme in a particular room, and yet on further reflection, sometimes we set it up and we go, oh, that just doesn't work. And so, in other words, that's sort of foolish to have it that way. For example, here's a good one. Never put a love seat in your teenager's bedroom. That's just sending the wrong message, and you're asking for trouble. If you do, call it something else. Some folks say that furniture arrangement and decoration styles are really more than just an art form. It really is sort of a philosophy. You ever hear of feng shui? Feng shui? This is from Chinese origin. It's an approach to specifically architecture, but also decor, furniture arrangement, things like that, that seeks to harmonize individuals with their surrounding environment in order to increase their happiness and joy and all that. And it's much more than that. I'm just sort of giving you the basic understanding of it. And, you know, personally, I'm happy as long as the color of my couch doesn't clash with the rug that sits in front of it. You know, that's feng shui enough for me. And you don't have to be a feng shui expert to know, though, that there's a foolish way and there's a wise way to arrange one's furniture. And we're all trying to figure that out. But now, that's not what Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians 1. He's referring to a very specific piece of furniture. And it's something that many of us have in our homes, although it's not really furniture necessarily. But I'm talking about the cross of Christ. That's what Paul is talking about, that big piece of straight timber on which hung the one who took on the crooked timber of humanity. The cross of Christ is the centerpiece of Christianity's living room. And really it seems kind of foolish to think that God would include the cross. This is something that people died on. It was a method of capitalist punishment. It would seem foolish to think that God would include that in any kind of divine decor, yet that's exactly what Paul is trying to say in 1 Corinthians. But again, it seems so out of place. It's like putting a soda fountain in your living room, or a trampoline in your bathroom, or a love seat in your teenager's bedroom. From a human perspective, the cross seems rather foolish, and Paul even refers to it as a stumbling block. Have you ever gotten up in the middle of the night, probably to go to the bathroom, and you stumbled over a piece of furniture that you'd forgotten was there? You had moved it previously, and there it was, and you stumped your toe or your knee or whatever. Well, the cross is like that. It's the stumbling block to those who think they're wise. Nevertheless, as you and I rearrange our spiritual furniture, the cross needs to occupy our living room, the place in our hearts where God lives and resides. And then finally, I'll be brief about this one, because I know you all know the story, so I'm not going to elaborate, but sometimes rearranging furniture requires a more radical approach, and Jesus understood this very well. One day he walked into the temple, into God's house, and he decided to rearrange the furniture by overturning the tables of the money changers, because apparently he didn't like their priorities. They had turned God's house into a marketplace. So here's what our three readings, our lessons are teaching us this morning about rearranging our spiritual furniture. First of all, some things we can simply rearrange, move to another place. Like our priorities, we can say this is more important than that and be okay with it. Second, though, other things like the cross of Christ need to be put front and center in our spiritual living rooms. And then third, there are also things, however, that need to be kicked over or even demolished, taken away from our spiritual makeup. And the season of Lent is the season of trying to figure out what to do with all that furniture. Sometimes we might call it baggage. Do we do a little rearranging, a little redecorating? Do we put something in a more prominent place in our decorating scheme, or do we get rid of stuff? Do we take it to the trash dump? So your Lenten homework today is to reassess your priorities, but make sure that faith is front and center. Let me conclude, however, one brief caveat. Make sure when you do this that we aren't just rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Amen.